I'm assuming we're live like every week. So happy Wonder Wednesday, everyone. I hope you're doing well, whether you're watching us now live or whether you'll be watching this video in the future. Welcome to our Floxies Community live show. If this is your first time here, we are an international community for women in UX UI design and Webflow development. And every week we get together here, live streaming for you, bringing you the best guest speakers from either the design or the Webflow space, and we try and bring some value into our community, and we offer you these free events every Wednesday to share all the resources that we gather, and to make sure that we spread the word about design, women in design especially, and to make sure that we create a safe and supportive space for us all. So let me know where you're joining us from. So happy Wonder Wednesday, and also happy birthday to my mom, who's my who's my number one fan, and she's always watching our live. So hi, mom, happy birthday. Without further ado, let me get into our metaverse on Gather Town, which is what we use to host our event, but it's also our virtual office. So throughout the week, you can find us here co-working together. And you can also find us on Discord, because that's the community platform that we use. And so if you're interested, if you like today's event, would like to join us, go ahead, check our website and join our community. It's free to join. So enough of me blabbing. We have started a sort of summer camp on HTML and CSS, and that's what we're showing today as well. We're on to episode 2. So today we're going to be teaching you all about client first. So let me go ahead and introduce you to my guest. All right.
Oh,
Here's our lovely Floxies and our guest. Hi everyone. I was just saying, happy Wonder Wednesday to our audience on the internet online, and happy Wonder Wednesday to everyone here at Floxies Community. Happy Wonder Wednesday to you, Ailin. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being our mentor and tutor throughout this summer camp, like we like to call it. So I was just hinting to the audience that we started this summer camp centered around HTML and CSS, because it's one of the most important skills to master, especially if you want to pursue a career in web development. I would like for you to introduce yourself again briefly, and maybe tell us, why is it so important again to master HTML and CSS, and what are we going to explore in today's episodes? Over to you.
Thanks, Claudia, and thanks for inviting me on. So firstly, my name is Ailin Tobin, or Ailin Tobin. I'm a Webflow expert from Ireland, and I've been building websites and products on Webflow since around 2018. And so firstly, why is it important to know HTML and CSS? Well, I see Webflow as a development tool similar to VS Code. I don't see it as a design tool. So I see it as a web development tool that produces HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if we understand the fundamentals of those, then essentially we can almost do anything with Webflow at the moment. And then any kind of difficulties that we might have with it, with a bit of with integrations with other products, we can produce really high-end products. The other side of it is, if we're going for marketing sites and straight, if you understand the fundamentals of HTML and CSS, your website will not only look good, but it will perform incredibly fast and efficiently. And it will ultimately, that if it's a marketing tool you're thinking about, it will rank higher in Google search for not only SEO purposes, but also for performance purposes. So these are the reasons that I focus on HTML and CSS. So in the last day, it was 2 weeks ago, we started very rudimentary. We talked about classes, semantic classes, div blocks, the section in Webflow versus a div with the class of section, and containers, and how to put basic styles on classes and repeat them throughout, reuse those classes throughout a site. So it was very introductory, very rudimentary, but at the same time incredibly important, because there was one example where, just a very basic example of how Webflow produces automated classes for us if we style things multiple times, that we could have the same look, but we're creating different CSS classes, and it looks good, but it's fundamentally not the best. So from that, there was a question about client first, and there was a question about frameworks. And the two frameworks that I like to use are Mast and Client First. And so this class we're going to talk about, we're going to do an intro to Client First, and I'm going to talk about the core strategy of the framework of Client First, and talk about, we're going to migrate from, or evolve from, understanding classes like we did in the last talk to looking at how Client First use classes. And in that process, I'm going to build out a hero section, and hopefully that will be done in about 20 minutes, and we'll leave it open to the floor to ask questions.
Amazing. Well, sounds good to me. And as per usual, if you do come up with some questions, people who are watching and here at Floxies, do pop them in the chat. We'll make sure we'll either ask them throughout our Q&A, or if you have a burning question, I might stop Ailin and just ask him straight away. But yeah, let's get started. Exciting times.
Okay.
And hi, Carmia, who's watching us. And yeah, tell me who you are. I can see people. I mean, I can see numbers of people that are watching, but unless you write in the chat, I don't know who you are, and I would love to know who's watching. So hi, Carmia. I can see your screen. Awesome.
You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm over here in the Finsweet documents, Client First documents, and they have incredibly comprehensive documentation about how to use Client First. And it's one of the reasons that it's become so popular, is that the documentation is so robust, and the rules are, they're quite they're strict, easy to follow, but they also have flexibility in it, depending on how one develops. So what we're going to look at today, first of all, is this core strategy of how Client First, how I would, and how anyone using Client First would structure their site. So the site is set up with, first of all, a page wrapper and a main wrapper, and you can see they've got an example here. Now the page wrapper is literally just a div with the class of page wrapper. Now, usually there isn't any reason to style this div or this class. The fundamental purpose of this, if I go over here into the site, is that we're able to, you may have noticed this with Webflow, if you have everything wrapped in a page wrapper, you can easily copy it and add it to a new page. So we'll just do a quick example of this. If I create just a new page, I'm not going to untitle it, and we paste in the options, and now, because I have everything wrapped in this page wrapper, everything, all the classes underneath have moved over seamlessly. So that's the main reason that I use it. Other than that, maybe you'd style it, but I wouldn't really be styling the main wrapper or the page wrapper. Now we're not going to talk about the nav bar in this situation. We're going to jump straight into the main. Now the main is a div with the class of main wrapper. And if we look in here, I've got my div with the class of main wrapper. And what this should be, this is the class. It's just a div. And if we go into the semantic HTML, it's given a tag of main. So what this means is that the main content of our website is going to be inside this wrapper. So this is where Google and other search engines are going to look for our sections and our content within our sections. So this is the fundamental purpose of the main wrapper. And as we go down through the structure, we see that we have sections, global padding, container plus a size, and a padding section plus a size. Now, one of the lovely things about client first is the next underneath the main. So we've got our section and identifier. You can see here that I've just called it section identifier. I haven't added any styling to this yet, or just kept it as a section and given it, and we're going to add some identifiers to it. I'm going to just make sure that this is given a tag of section. So the way I like to develop is I always develop using divs, and then I add the semantic HTML onto the div after. So we've got our section and identifier set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to hero. And just for this purpose, I'm going to make it second section. And we're going to just call this features. Now, when we look at our Webflow project, if we have multiple sections and they're given an identifier, if you are a developer that hasn't used this project or you've come in on a project, we can easily see how the website is structured. Now, for me, why I like this is if you're using something like VS Code, you would add comments above a section, and that comment would tell us what is inside that section. But we don't have that luxury in Webflow. So this is a really simple, easy way for one to go through the HTML and understand what is in each of these sections and what we will be, trying to achieve, or what we should try and fix or update. So go back to client first. We've got our section plus identifiers. So we're just going to focus on the hero section. And inside our section, we've got these other classes. So these are we've got our global padding and our container. So when I open up, we've got our global padding. And in Webflow, this is, we've got different types of classes: utility, custom, global, and combo. And with client first, if you download or clone one of the client first starter kit, all of these classes are already written out for you. So for example, the point of this global padding is they've given us this nice already pre-existing padding left and right. And as we cascade down through, you can see here that it changes in size. So it's already responsive. They've already written out this CSS for us. And this is the same with other pre-written classes, such as padding section large, container medium, container small, padding section medium. But we'll go into those in a little bit more detail. We'll just stick with what we're doing here. So we are cascading down from our section, and we're going to start building out the rest of our hero section. So all of these classes, they're set so that there's a standardization throughout the site. And this global wrapper, the main thing it does is that it makes sure that everything is, even though we're going to use containers, it's contained, and it contained within the padding here and doesn't hit either side. So just so that we can visually see this, I'm going to add a combo or custom class, a combo class to this global padding. I'm going to add in a pre-written class called background. We'll go with background color black. And just so that we can see what's going on here, I'm going to add a background color also to of these internal. No. So I've just done this. This combo class is within the rules of client first, but I'm doing this just so that we can have a visual understanding of what the padding global is doing to our site. So you can see here we've got black padding left and right, and as we go down through we're going down here through our site, it is responding according to the different breakpoints. And now the nice thing about this is if we wanted to update this, we simply just go down here, and I'm going to do it on these guys. If we go and we change, let's say we want, usually I think that 1.25 REM is a bit too much on a mobile, so I usually change this down to 1 either side, or sometimes even 0.75. You can see that it'll happen throughout all of the classes, and it'll mean there's a consistency for the product. And we'll do that again. So now we've got our consistent padding left and right, and it means that everything, we're not going to have things, we may have objects bleeding off onto to left or right of the screen, but it means we've got a better chance of things being contained.
Ailin,
So
let me just check with everyone. Is everyone following okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, I can see Nancy. Yeah, you guys. Yeah, Lucy. Awesome. Just want to make sure that, yeah, Carice. All right, we're all good. Just wanted to make sure that.
Please do stop me if I've gone too fast or if there's something that we don't understand. Just,
Awesome.
That's usually where we get the best learning from, is if I've missed something or if I've gone too fast. Okay, so at the moment we've an understanding of basic understanding of how our site is structured down to our padding global. So I'm going to remove the colors and we're going to look inside. So we have our hero section, our padding global, and our padding section large. Now, this particular the padding section large is designed so that we just put this inside of a section, and there's padding section. It has already predefined paddings. You can see that we've got I'm going to give the container a background color just so that we can have a visual of this, and I'm going to give this a background color of gray. Now, can people see what I'm doing here? I've just added these combo classes so that we can see what we're working with. So now in the background, we've got our padding global is in white, our padding section large here is in gray, and inside we've got a black div. And if you can see, as we cascade down, client first has already written out this perfectly responsive setup for us. So it means that on the different devices, what is going to be contained within these divs will respond perfectly to the devices that we're working with. Now, there is this particular setup that we have here is not strict. For example, sometimes people move the padding global outside of the sections, and that means that all sections inside the padding global have this padding outside it. It really depends on your design, but the way I like to do it is I like to have my sections first, followed by a padding global, followed by the padding section size, and we can change this padding section to, depending on our design again, we can put in we've got a few different sizes here. We've got large, medium, and small, depending on what we're doing. And if we want, we can build out we can create our own versions of these paddings, but we're just going to stick with padding section large for the moment. Now, inside the padding section, we add a container. And this container, I've given a background color of black. And the container is already defined for us. We were talking about this last week, that it's got its auto left and right, a width of 100%, and a max width of 80 REM. Now, since I've just talked about REM, I know that last week the REMs was a question. So an REM is 1 REM equals 16. Let's put in a piece of 1 REM equals 16 pixels.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at our container, so this is the first time we've got a max width. So that is 80 by 16 pixels, and we're going to have the exact same result. So it's 1280 pixels. And the reason why we use REM is that they're more accessible, they're scalable, and essentially it's more accessible. It creates more accessible design. So we can touch on that in a later talk.
Episode.
Just wanted to episode. Thank you. So now we are inside our container. Now, we said we're going to build out a hero section. So inside the container, now one of the shortcuts that I like using is Command D or Control E. I'm going to add in a div. And this is where everything up until now has been predefined, pre-written CSS, and now we're going to create our first custom class. And what we're going to make is we're going to make a hero component, and you can see I've actually already built it. So this hero component, we're just adding in. Reason why we're putting in hero is that this hero is connected to this identifier. So you can see here we've got our section hero, and inside this section we've got a hero component. So it makes it very easy to read and understand exactly what we're doing. Now in this hero component, I want to make it into a grid. We can do what we want, but I'm going to make a grid, and I've given it a gap here of 2 REM, and I want it to be 1 REM as it responds down. We put 125 here and then 1 here. Now, perhaps, yeah, we're going to just leave it. We're going to work on desktop version for the moment. Now, inside the hero component, I'm going to add in 2 more divs, making a straightforward. So again, the way I always add in my divs is I go Command or Control E. And this div on the left, we're going to call it hero content. And this div on the right, we're going to call hero image. So you can see the consistency that we have when we look through our HTML or Webflow HTML. We've got section hero, hero component, hero content, hero image. It's very consistent. Everything, and it's nice and clean, and anybody's going to be able to read exactly what we're doing. Now, inside hero content, we've got a couple of options here. We can start styling this if we want. We could add some padding. Or we can style this. Usually I tend not to. I tend to add the styles at a later inside it. So we can add another global class or utility class if we add a div, and Webflow have already written out. If we type in padding, you can see all these versions of padding that we have here. Look at all this. This is like so helpful. We've got all this pre-written CSS. But the one we're looking for here is padding vertical because I want to put a bit of space on top of and bottom. And I'm going to add in, type in padding, medium. So what I've done now is I know that I'm going to be adding 2 rem, which is 32 pixels of padding on top and bottom of this particular div. Now I'm going to start adding in items inside. So I'm going to add in a heading. Ooh. I'm going to add in a paragraph. Now over here, I'm going to just add inside my hero image, I'm going to add in an image. So what we have now is we've got the basic structure of our hero section. We're going to just type this hero heading, and we're going to leave this as it is. Also, so the last day we were talking about headings and the difference between styling and styling the semantic HTML and styling the classes. So client first again have written out all these. If we type in heading, there's all these predefined styles. So I want a large heading, so we're going to go with heading style H1. And I'm going to add in here for the text, we also have our text size. Yeah, we put in medium. So we've all this predefined classes for us. And then over here, so we need to put in a bit of a gap. There's a couple of ways of doing this, but the way that I like to add in a bit of spacing at the bottom here is I like to add in a div and give that div the predefined padding class. So I'm going to type in padding bottom and give it a padding of, we're going to say medium for the moment. So what I've done there is I've added a little gap, just a space in between the hero heading and the padding. Now, over here, I've called this hero image, but what I really should call this is hero image wrapper. And this is going to be called our hero image. Now, the way I like to build out my images is I like to make them responsive. So I'm going to just show you a quick trick on how I make responsive images. So the first thing that we have to do is the wrapper. We have to make it relative. I'm going to give it a width of 100%. So I'm making it a responsive square image here. So that 100% is going to fill up the grid that the wrapper is in. I'm going to give it a padding of 100%. And now this hero image, I'm going to make it absolute and position it like so, and give it a width of 100% and then a height of 100%. So what this means now is the image, and we're going to cover. So this image here will respond like if we start zooming out. It's always going to be a square.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing that we haven't done is if we go here, this is kind of getting a bit, it's probably not the best in terms of responsiveness. It's definitely not great here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to change this grid here from one col. And now we've got we zoom out, we should have a responsive, yeah, that's not looking great. So we'll change this to 1 as well. Remove this one. And we should have a fairly decent responsive here. Go down. And the one thing, why is this not,
A
this is not
square.
responding as a
Mm.
square, because I've got this, if you can see here, the flex properties. So if we change the flex to center, there we go, flex center, this will look a little bit better. It should all stay as a square. This really depends on how you want to design, but
Mm-hmm.
okay, I suppose I've gone on there. We've built out. It's not looking amazing, but we've got our basic setup, and from here we can pretty much style and build out anything. So I might leave it at this, and if anybody has any questions, we can go from there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. As I was saying to you earlier on, I feel like from the feedback that I've gathered is like client first might look a little bit intimidating, but I think it's a matter of just getting your hands dirty with it, and the more you use it, the more people don't look back because it's so it enhances the speed of your build, doesn't it? Because everything's kind of like ready made for you. And so, what would you say? I guess my question is, what would you say the most complex or the biggest challenge is when using client first? Given that everything
Um,
is kind of ready made, is there a limitation for your own customization?
there's no limitation for your own customization. No, the biggest challenge is just the consistency of naming and making sure that everything is clean. So you can see here that we made these custom classes inside here, and it was fairly straightforward. So the thing that a lot the thing that is a little bit different, and the one thing that is encouraged by client first, is you're nesting lots and lots of divs inside each other. So that takes a little bit of getting used to, that we're putting a div inside a div, and it can get a little bit too deep and a little bit complicated, or not complicated. You can, like, for example, I could have easily added, instead of a padding bottom here, I could have this heading wrapped it in a div and added, which is also a part of, this is um could have added a class margin bottom and margin medium. We end up with the same result, and this exact setup is encouraged by client first. But the reason that I don't like doing this particular setup is I once we get down to this level, I can't see what I'm working with here.
Mhm.
If you, so that's why I prefer to have it set up that it's stacked on top of each other like this. Um, so that would be one thing. And earlier I touched on potentially styling this div, whereas I would encourage people to not do that if there's pre-defined styles set up for us. Again, that means more stacking, or going deeper and adding in more divs, and having divs nested inside of divs. But then in saying that, you could, both of these options are correct here now, which I'm about to do. You could create your hero content as, you could create it as a grid like this, and this follows the rules of client first and does the exact same thing as what I did already. Kind of to REM. So I suppose this is where earlier I said that it gives us very strict rules but allows for customization and flexibility.
Mhm.
So that we've ended up with the exact same layout, but it was done in 3 different ways.
Yeah, that's true. Awesome. Well, thank you for, answering my question. We have a question from Irina in the chat. A couple questions. Well, one question in particular: is there a common practice for naming classes across different pages, sections in particular, to see what page each section belongs to?
Yeah. So it does. Um, So the identifier is, so here we've got the identifier as hero. Now, if we're building a one-page website, client first would say that this is adequate. But if we want this to be our homepage and we've got an about page, well, according to client first, it should be home hero. And then everything inside should be changed accordingly. Home hero, and home hero content. So what we're working with inside a section should always have the same, the identifiers should be consistent. So if we go to a new page, like I'm going to just copy this over, and we have our untitled page, and we should leave it as untitled just for this example. Oh, the home hero section is already updated. Delete that. Now, if we want to change this to, we're never going to have an untitled page. We're calling this the untitled page, untitled heading. We would have to change all of these classes so that they're consistent. So that they're consistent throughout, so it's consistent, and so that once we go into, we cascade down through our different options here, that we understand exactly what we're working with. Now, this, you can see, is a bit of, there's a bit of an issue here if you're trying to scale your site. Untitled. So now, so this is the very fundamental way that we should do this. Oh, this needs to be duplicated as well. Okay, so now we've got all of, I did this wrong way around, didn't I?
There's always, as you were saying, learning, in those kind of experiences, and reverse engineering, it's always a learning experience, an opportunity.
So this now is perfectly set up according to client first. And we have our identifiers cascading down, and it also shows exactly what we have on each of these pages. So this, because the page is called untitled, that is the reason why I've given it the identifier untitled. If the page was named about, we would change that to about. If the page was named team, we would do the same, and then we'd have a team component, team content, and team image. Another way that could be done is, and this is a way that I prefer to do, because I prefer to have my, if I'm trying to scale, if we're working on larger sites, is I like leaving it as it is, as hero image. I'll quickly change all of these. And if we want to add customization, so this allows us now to use the exact same classes across multiple pages. But if I wanted to, for example, let's say the home hero section has a different background color, I add in the combo class of is hero. This is also within the rules of client first. And for this purpose, I'm just going to give it a background color of red, big, horrible red. Now, this is another way of doing the exact what we did earlier on, but in it allows us repeat sections and repeat classes, and would be the same. Let's say we want this to be in column. I would change this to is hero. I don't want it to be a grid anymore. I want it to be a col. We would update it like so. And perhaps we want this hero image to have a different ratio. We would say is hero. So I suppose, does that answer that particular question, or did I go too deep?
Yes, it does. Yeah, Irina says yes! Exclamation mark. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Ailin. It's better to have a lengthy answer than no answer at all. So I love that. We do have an interesting question here from Lucy. Thought-provoking question. It's called
Right.
client first, but I'm wondering, is it ever actually used directly by clients? I know this was the purpose at first.
Personally, no. I've never taught a client how to understand client first. Personally, I don't like giving, even though it's pretty much impossible, I don't like encouraging my clients or people to go in here and work with these work with the HTML and CSS. So I can just speak from experience that I've not given it to clients. So I say no.
Do you know of anyone who does?
I don't. I don't actually know. I know of one particular developer is experimenting with different parts of over here, using like the settings, like the attribute settings, to allow the team that he's built the product for manipulate things. But no, generally, and that might be the clients that I work for generally don't have any interest in working on what they just want me to build stuff and make it look and work good.
But maybe do you think it could help like maintaining the sites for your clients?
I think it is better for developers and Webflow developers and designers more so than clients. It really depends on the skill set of the client. Like if a client has an understanding of HTML and CSS, then it would be very straightforward to learn. But it would be getting them up to that learning curve and understanding. They would have to have a very strong understanding of how to develop on Webflow before this would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I don't see how it helps clients. But that's directly. But how it would indirectly help clients is if, for example, I was to come into a product that was already built, and use a product that was already built in Webflow, and it was built using client first, it would speed up my process of understanding what the previous developer did, which would reduce time and reduce costs. So that would be definitely a benefit, which would be a client first benefit.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Lucy, does that answer your question? Do you have any more questions on client first? Do you use client first actually? Because I know you're a great developer.
No, I don't. No, I guess I have my own way of naming classes. I get a little annoyed with all the nesting. But it's also because I don't really need it, because I'm the only one working on my sites usually. So indeed, as soon as I would need someone to come work with me, I'd need some kind of framework. So that could be an option. But no, I don't use it myself.
Mm-hmm.
That comment of getting annoyed about the nesting, like I can definitely relate to that. does sometimes it does seem like overkill, and this is one of the reasons why, I know I've styled out this particular component here, but why I would stack divs on top of each other to reduce that nesting. But the thing in terms of speed and the way Webflow operates as a dev tool is if you are going Command E, typing in a div, you're giving it a class of, about component, and then if you're just using the shortcuts, you're able to, just it makes it quicker to dev in this instance. When you're nesting like that. So that I understand why they've done it. So if I add in another div now,
definitely, and because now also you even have this shortcut where you can add a div around something that is already there, right? You have this Command G, I think, or Command Option G is, I think, where you add a div.
So
you wrap something into
role and Command Option G. So even if we wanted to, for example, turn this into a div or a link, and if we just say we wanted this to be like the about content, which we didn't do, and we're going to so in terms for the development process, the nesting is incredibly quick, but for maintenance later on, if it goes too deep, it can be frustrating.
But I think it's just personal. Like I don't really like to have too many classes also combined, like combo classes. I like to have like a max of 2, and I like to put, when I'm on a page, I find it easier to navigate if I, instead of call them section feature, I'll call it feature section and about section, so that I can see it. I don't know. It's whatever. It's just my own.
No, I
habits.
Get you. And so the reason for the section underscore features as opposed to the other way around is when client first, it gets more complex with the folder structure that they have. So it actually structures things inside of each of these essentially. So section is a folder, features is a folder, and then everything under features, or that should be about, I suppose, is because I was using about, and then everything under this is it when you get deeper into the client first folder structure, this kind of makes a bit more sense. But I had those issues at the start as well. So I do there, and the thing is you're not wrong, and client first isn't necessarily right. They're just two ways of doing the same thing.
And that's why I guess we have also like multiple frameworks. What you were saying, like it's down to your client, it's also down to the way you work, I think, as well. Like it's what aligns best with your practice and your liking and what you find easier to use. I was asking Gabriella here in the community because she's a traditional, full stack developer. And I was like, what does it look like to you, coming from your perspective, from your expertise? And she says in the chat, he does things so naturally. I remember I just wanted to throw my PC out of the window when I tried Webflow. I thought it would have been easier to learn it as a developer. What's your what do you think about that? Why does a developer find it hard at first?
So I will tell you why I love Webflow. Is when I develop using VS Code, I am constantly publishing usually locally, so that I can see the results of what I've written. So I'm, even before visual development was a thing, I was a very visual developer. So when I think as a developer, but I can see what I'm doing right away. For me, that's quicker, but I can understand how some other developers, they can imagine what they're writing, and they would find this process annoying because they like to write and they can see they can imagine what the writing is, what they've written in terms of HTML, CSS, and even when they're writing JavaScript, they can imagine what the outcome is. So I understand that. Again, I think it's just two sides of the same coin. I'm more of a visual person, and that's why it works for me.
I wonder if that's how writers, traditional writers and film directors, their comparison, like you were saying, when people code, they can imagine what the build is going to be like. And I guess it's the same for writers, when they're writing, they can see what it looks like. And then when somebody makes a film out of their book, it's like, well, that's not what I meant. Or
I'd say quite possibly, yeah. Potentially, like we all have different brains and different ways of doing things.
mhm.
For me, this just when I found Webflow, I think I said the last day I was trying to build like a mega menu or something, and it was I did it so quickly, and the results were better than what I could have written, and
Mhm.
that's when I went all in on Webflow. Um,
The haha moment.
yeah, personally, but I can see, when I try to use Figma, for example, it's like pulling teeth. It doesn't. I just haven't. I'm not natural at using Figma. I still like writing code, but this for me is the most natural tool.
And that's the beautiful thing of having communities, like the global Webflow design community we have, our community, because you can always match, have these people team up. In our community as well, we have people that love designing on Figma, but they, like Gabriela saying, as soon as they see Webflow, they're like, no, get it out of here. And on the other hand, we have people who just love to build. And so it's so beautiful to then, for me as a community manager, at least be like, hey, have you met this person? I feel like, there's a good match over there. And yeah, I love that. I love that we're sharing this beautiful space. We do have a question from YouTube from Ruma, who's watching us. We have a spacer class as well as a padding and margin classes in client first. Can you tell under which scenarios we can use spacer classes and padding margin combo classes and their limitations? I'm gonna paste that in the chat as well for you to reread if you need to.
So, um, okay, so you have a spacer class.
As well as a padding and margin classes in client first. Can you tell under which scenarios we can use spacer classes and padding margin combo classes and their limitations?
Okay, so the spacer class is a custom class that they have added to their own client first setup, I suppose, which is perfectly fine. The reason I like using, okay, I'm going to change. So hero content. The reason I like using the padding margin is more so that I don't think I have it set up here. I don't, but I'll give you an example. I'm going to change this to home hero is home. And we're going to change this to a column. Okay, so a spacer class is fine. There's no issue with using that. I like adding in a div, giving a padding of bottom. And why I like using the padding bottom is that we've got options here. We can use whichever, we've got padding large. It gives me a bit of flexibility. But the way I speed up my process, and this can be done with a spacer class as well, is I actually turn this into a component. And I call it, oh no, it's medium, isn't it? So now, if I'm down here and I want to add space, I know this is poorly it doesn't have much contrast, but I just press Command E and type in medium. And that consistency means that I know that there's always going to be a space of 2 REM, and as it cascades down, it's going to respond to 1.5, 1.25, and so on. So that's how I tend to use this. And if I thought that was too small, I didn't put in another div, call it padding bottom large. And I would do the same thing. And I would just call it. So for me, having it set up like this, I think it's more that I know what I'm getting when I add this in, and I know that it's consistent. So that's how why I would use this, and why I wouldn't think I'd need to add in a spacer, a class called spacer, but there's no reason why you can't.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, I hope that answers your question, Bruma. Amazing. All right, Ailin, let me see. We're coming up to the hour. People from Floxies community, do you have any last burning questions for today's event? And as you know, as they think about it, what should we be expecting for our third episode of our summer camp? Are you going to give us some homework? Are we actually going to write something?
Oh, I wasn't thinking of that. Maybe, yeah, maybe everybody make a hero section. Make a hero section, as this is what we've done, and it doesn't have to be like I went very dev. Like I was just boring. I didn't try and make things special, and that will probably bring us on to looking at more custom classes and custom features and how to customize things as we go on. So yeah, maybe we'll look at a bit of typography next time and custom classes, and then perhaps the last class we'll look at how I use components and have more like utility and global setups.
Awesome. Well, sounds good to me. Looking forward to it. So amazing. Thank you so much, Ailin. I think it wasn't boring at all. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to learn from you, and I always admire your expertise on the matter. So 100%. I hope you're enjoying it as well whilst you're here. It's definitely a first experience for us to do kind of summer camp, but as we were saying, it's such a fundamental skill that I just wanted to have one of the best people teaching us that. So it's our pleasure. Amazing. All right. Well, then I guess I will see you onto our next Wonder Wednesday. And so for everyone here, I can see some people have just tuned in. There's the recording in our Discord, so do join the community. If you're not part of the community, reach out to me. I'll send it to you, or just subscribe to our channel. You'll get them all there. All right, amazing. And take care, everyone. It was great to see you all. And I'll see you next Wednesday. All right. And that's it. Bye, people.